Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the TMZ Podcast. I'm Charlie Cotton and joining me today is the legal eagle, Derek Kaufman.
We got a stack of legal stories today.
Oh,
It's going deep.
it really is.
We're going to the courtroom, my friend.
Mind-blowing legal stories. Paula Abdul has fired back at her ex-boss, her ex-friend, Nigel Lythgoe, and they're both exposing each other's text messages and emails. It's just like...
The gloves are off.
Wow. Andy Cohen says former housemate Leah McSweeney's lawsuit is a shakedown. He's now clapping back at her. Our almost news is one of the biggest news pieces of the day, but we just had to slip it in there. But to begin with, the armorer on the Rust set, the one where Alec Baldwin fired a gun and killed Halyna Hutchins. This lady's name is Halyna Gutierrez-Reed. She was just found guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
This is a huge deal. And no one is watching this case more closely than Alec Baldwin,
Right.
who is facing his own charge of involuntary manslaughter for the same tragic incident that killed Halyna Hutchins. Now, some people, I want to say, initially might think, oh, they found the person who's guilty of involuntary manslaughter, so this is good for Alec Baldwin. He's off, like you get one person kills. That's not true. He's still going to face his own charges for involuntary manslaughter. Many people can be responsible for the death of Halyna Hutchins. The jury has now found Halyna Gutierrez-Reed responsible, and basically the case amounted to, you were a bad armorer. This set was an absolute mess. You have deadly weapons on set and you had deadly bullets to put in them, and that was an accident waiting to happen. And to find someone criminally responsible is a large hurdle to clear. And the jury found that they cleared it. They said the level to which you just let bullets lie around and, didn't follow safety protocols is something that needs to be held criminally responsible. And so she will end up getting sentenced at a later date, but she was remanded to the authorities, which means live in court, you're convicted, and you don't get to go home and hang out. You go with the bailiff and you head off to jail. And
And I might say, the silver lining, new hot mugshot girl.
She
She
does look better.
Looks nice.
She's facing a lot. And
How much is she facing?
She's facing up to 18 months, which doesn't sound like a lot. But remember, this is involuntary manslaughter. No one is saying Halyna Gutierrez intentionally killed Halyna Hutchins.
Right,
she was just so reckless and so negligent on set, according to the jury, that she needs to be held responsible, needs to serve some time for, filling a position like that. Her defense was, I had too many jobs. It was overwhelming. This was short-staffed. And how can I be responsible? There's other people who were backstopping me. Didn't work.
I mean, the witnesses that the prosecution had, including the assistant director, the producer on the film, the line producer, all gave evidence that this lady sort of cut corners, even when they were trying to ask her, like, hey, should we do these checks for weapons, like in and out type, sort of a check of where the weapons are? And she was like, no, I got it, basically. And so looking at this now, Alec Baldwin must be shivering in his boots.
I absolutely think so. He has one advantage. He has now seen how the prosecutors present their case. So remember, he's had his lawyers watching this case closely to see what prosecutors put together. Their case against Alec is going to be different. It's about probably mostly about his role as producer and what responsibility he had with the safety protocols, and his role as actor, whether he should have, while blocking the scene, pulled that trigger, because he's always maintained he was fiddling with it, didn't pull the trigger, but there's been forensic examination of this gun, and they say the only way it could fire is if you depress the trigger with your finger. And remember, initially he went out and interviewed disastrously and said, I played with the hammer.
Stupid idea.
It was a really stupid idea. Now it's coming home, right? Because he's going to have to sort of make sense of that statement against the forensics that say that couldn't happen, sir. So he's already playing catch up a little bit. I think this is bad news for him. Now, Dave Halls, there's two things he can follow. Dave Halls is the assistant director who yelled out cold gun. Very early on, he fell on the sword and said, I don't want to be criminally prosecuted. I'll cooperate with you. That's why he testified against Halyna. And he didn't have to do jail time. So maybe Alec's lawyers are like, hey, this isn't looking good. The juries are very upset about this incident. Maybe we should try to cut a deal, but it may be too late. He's fought so hard with prosecutors. Maybe they're like, nah, we like the jury. We're going to go for it.
And Halyna, when the verdict came out, she was so stoic, like zero reaction. And then her family behind her was like, obviously super upset. One of the weirdest parts of this whole saga is after this death, they kept shooting the movie, kept going with the movie. It's just like, you guys just fumbled this up until like this moment. It's what a catastrophe this whole thing was.
It's been a catastrophe. Now, they got Halyna's widower on board with this production, so he is sort of, I think, a producer or some sort of executive producer role. So maybe they thought, hey, if he's behind it, they'll see it as something that maybe Halyna would have wanted. I think they've botched this whole thing. I really do. I think the people are upset that someone died on a set in New Mexico. They're not used to filming productions there, and they take this very, very seriously. I think it's going to be tough. I think Alex should be very, very worried about what happened yesterday.
Okay, on to our next story. Paula Abdul. She is clapped back at Nigel Lythgoe. So she is suing Nigel Lythgoe for sexual harassment, various incidents where he forced himself upon her, he touched her in unwanted places, he kissed her, he jumped upon her at his house.
According to Paula.
According to Paula. So in response to that, Nigel, released emails basically showing an affectionate relationship. Paula was very friendly. She was loving in the email. So Paula was like, okay, I see those emails and I'll raise you some more, because she's saying that, there's a power dynamic, that she was trying to placate him, play to his ego, because he's her boss and he held the cards to her career. And so now she has fired back, showing that these are various things that Nigel said to Paula. He said, when you get back to LA, will you please make love to me slowly and lovingly? He double texted because she didn't respond. He says, I'll take that as a yes. And then in another text, he says, I'll come if you promise a big wet kiss with tongues. Is a small grope of the ass asking too much? A few months later, he says, you love me like a relation. I love you like a girlfriend. I could easily be your fucking cousin. Ha ha.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure
that's her boss.
Ed is her boss. There is a definite power dynamic, and I'm sure at the time he thought this was playful and reciprocated. This is what Nigel is. He released his text messages. Now, why he did so, knowing that she may have this in her pocket.
Dumb.
Query whether that was a good approach, but he thought this was like a playful exchange, but it clearly doesn't seem that way now that Paula has filed a lawsuit. And Paula, when he came out with his emails of, look how affectionate she is, how could I have sexually assaulted her, said what I think everyone was thinking, which is, when there's a power dynamic, you behave a certain way towards your boss. If Harvey texted these things to me, no, I mean,
wow.
not to joke, he would never. I mean, he's never done so. But if he did, it is hard to respond like, "Hey, stop it," and tisk tisk. He's your boss, and that is what Paula is saying.
That she responded in kind, almost.
Yes.
It's her boss, and so she understands that he sends these very overtly flirty emails and texts.
And I gotta play along, smile.
Which kind of, I mean, I get that.
It does make some sense. Now, I want to give Nigel his fair due. Like, in his response, he points to those text messages, but he also is just saying Paula was a mess. Let's not forget the early days of American Idol when everyone said, is Paula on drugs? Is Paula have substance abuse issues? She was very erratic. She would slur sometimes. And he brings all this up as well in his response in his legal documents. And he says, this isn't a reliable person. Let's remember who Paula Abdul is. So some of it is, we were mutually affectionate. The other part is, there's this plane crash that she's talked about in the early 90s.
That never happened.
I'm not even sure it happened. Now, that's wild stuff. So he's saying, you're going to believe someone who maybe faked a plane crash? And Paula, that's also risky, because if there is some evidence and other people were on this plane and they say, hey, dude, there was a plane crash and here's her surgery, that's going to make him look like a monster. So he played a risky move of, like, he was cornered and he's trying to save his reputation, but all of these shots he's taking have backlash if what Paula's saying is true.
God, when they finally get to court, it's just going to be even more. I mean,
it would be massive. I mean, Nigel Lythgoe is a huge figure. He's massively wealthy from American Idol, So You Think You Can Dance.
Yeah.
And she's obviously used to be America's sweetheart. When I was growing up, Paula Abdul was up there with like Janet Jackson.
Oh.
Yeah, she's a big, big deal. So we'll see. I think it's just starting to get nasty, and it doesn't look like they're like settling.
So Andy Cohen is firing back at ex-housemate Leah McSweeney. Leah McSweeney having filed a lawsuit against Andy for doing cocaine on set allegedly with housewives and then giving those housewives a favorable edit, and B, kind of
there's no set, it's a reality show.
cajoling her and other housewives into drinking when she was a recovering alcoholic. Just various things basically saying Andy Cohen was a terrible boss. Well, Andy Cohen is now firing back, calling it a shakedown, saying that her allegations are false, offensive, and defamatory. So my question to you is, that word defamatory, could Andy countersue?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what he's setting up. He's trying to put pressure on Leah McSweeney because there's two ways to respond to a lawsuit. One, denial and say what you're saying isn't true. It didn't happen. Therefore, you shouldn't be able to win any damages from me. And the other approach, often done in tandem with that, is to say, and by the way, I'm going to sue you. And that's what he's saying in this letter. He's saying what you said is so harmful to my reputation as the executive producer of this Bravo empire of Housewives that I'm going to sue you. And I think it's categorically false. And in his letter, he's got fancy lawyers. I know this law firm. They're very, very fancy lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
And he, he says, I know you're lying because when you allege that I do cocaine with other housewives, you didn't include the who, when, where, nothing. You just sort of basically blew out this rumor. It's destroying my reputation. I don't think you have the goods. And now Andy's playing a little bit of a dangerous game. Some people can come out and say, I did coke with you.
Yes.
She could, sort of assemble people. And that's what she's saying. She's saying, you sure you want to bring this in the press, bro? I got receipts. I just didn't put them in my initial complaint. But he's going and saying, you got nothing. And it's hard to prove cocaine use because it's one of those things that often happens in bathrooms behind closed doors.
But if
evidence is hard to find.
If she knew that this had happened, then I agree with Andy. Wouldn't she know who it was and kind of when or where it was? And that's sort of stuff that you would go, well, now I got the receipts.
I'll give you the nasty business of how this sometimes works. Is
Please.
She may say, like, I know this housewife. And then they get into a room where she says, pay me or I'm going to say you did cocaine with some name of a housewife, Kyle. I'm not saying that's the allegation. I'm just saying, what if she says that? And then he goes to Kyle and he says, Kyle, I didn't do that, did I? Now, Kyle is a very prominent housewife. She likes being on the Housewives. Is she going to side with Andy? Or is she going to help the outcast housewife Leah McSweeney just to help her lawsuit?
Right.
Her incentive is maybe to side with her boss, right? And to keep her job going. So it's hard to sort of gather up the witnesses you want to prove your case when you're just the pariah. She's the outsider now, and Andy Cohen still runs an empire. I don't know, and that's sort of nasty and people deceit, sort of lying, and I don't want to paint too sort of negative a picture, and I don't know who she's going to say, and it sounds like Andy doesn't, but things are interesting at this point.
Absolutely. Okay, on to our almost news, which is almost the number one trending topic on Twitter right now. Jake Paul, 27, is gonna fight Mike Tyson, who'll be 58.
More than twice his age.
Live on Netflix. All those words just don't really go together for me.
I'm dumbfounded. Mike Tyson is almost 60 years old. You remember when George Foreman fought in his 40s?
Yeah.
And he was already like a fat guy?
Yeah.
Mike Tyson's almost 60, bro.
Wow. So, I mean...
And yet, who do you think wins that fight?
I would have thought Mike Tyson, but I guess that's why it's a good matchup because he's so old that can he really do it with a young buck? So, yeah, it'll be live on Netflix in Dallas in July. And I think it'll probably get a lot of viewers. I mean, I'm interested.
I'm fascinated. I haven't watched the whole rise of Jake Paul because most of these fights against, YouTubers, and I call them tomato cans, and that's an old boxing expression. It's like, I don't care that you beat guys like Nate Robinson, who played for the Knicks. I never thought Nate Robinson was a good boxer. He's a good jumper. If you beat Mike Tyson, even at 58 years old, which Mike Tyson will be turning in June, I'm going to be impressed. Mike was one of the most ferocious punchers in history, and though he's definitely slowed down, smoked a lot of weed by his own admission, he's a different cat now. I think I wouldn't step into a ring with 80-year-old Mike Tyson. Would you?
80-year-old? No. How much ear biting is going to happen in this fight, I wonder?
He's nasty. That's the other thing. Mike is such a wild card, right? Are you going to get Mike the toned down sort of pothead, or are you going to get ferocious Mike going to hit the gym and say, I don't want to be embarrassed by some scummy social media star. I'm going to beat his teeth in. And everyone's waiting for Jake Paul to get beat up, right? I mean, maybe I'm a hater, but really, when you tune into a Jake Paul fight, you want to see him get his face smashed in, and he keeps winning, and it's like, oh boy, who's going to actually teach this guy a lesson?
The build-up for both of these guys is just going to be so fun. Mike's going to be on the road, the press tour. He's going to be loving it. Yes. Absolutely. And
I want your take, though. What do you think is going to happen in this fight? Will there be a knockout? Will it be old, tired Mike just sitting in the corner after round one and saying, I don't want to go on, give me my paycheck?
I think so. I think Mike will probably gas pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And Jake is very, very fit and very strong. I think that if it goes the distance, then Jake's got a pretty good shot. Probably not of knocking him out, But I mean, you
I
want to
agree.
see a knockout. I don't want to see like a decision at the end.
100%. I don't want to see these guys box for 12 rounds. I want to see Mike come out with everything in round one, just a barrage of his old ferocious like Mike Tyson punches. And if Jake Paul can withstand that, he'll win the fight. If not, he going down in round one because that guy can punch.
They're billing it as the biggest fight in history. And it, it just might be. These Paul brothers have changed the sport. No one really cares about like actual pro boxing, like the mainstream. The mainstream cares about these exhibition fights with people we love and hate.
I think it's wild. I agree with you. They've done something. This is the biggest fight ever. Everyone remembers Floyd and Manny. That was the biggest fight for a little while, Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. No one would think, maybe Mike Tyson should fight somebody. But for some reason, this makes enough sense that I think it could be the most lucrative fight in history.
Do you know the only fight that could possibly be bigger than this?
Give me the fight.
Derek Kaufman versus Charlie Cotton.
Oh,
live on TikTok.
We've already had a race, and I need a rematch.
We had a running race that I won, even though I fell over at the end.
You have those long gazelle strides. I'll give it to you. You made a T-shirt of it?
Yes, I made a T-printed, so I would remember the race that stopped the press, I called it, because everyone from our office went outside to watch the race. We should step in the ring, do a couple rounds. How do you think that'd go?
You don't ever step into a gym. And you want to tangle with this old man?
I'd
got
train.
Old man dad strength.
I'd train. I would train for the fight.
And you got Peach, so you have some dad strength, but I got two. Carter's like a bag of sand you throw against a river flood.
Okay, let's get it done. Okay, let's get it done. Thank you for joining me, Kaufman.
Always fun.
And we'll see you guys here tomorrow. Goodbye.